Hello, welcome to the Green Bay Football Show. My name is John Dodds. Tom Pippins is off this week, but substituting for him is our sponsor, Dave Heineck from Business Fitness. Dave, thanks for joining us.
Business Fitness is a NetSuite success agency. We're based in Mequon, and we've been at it since 2003 in the early days of cloud computing. And today we've got a thriving business with lots of really exciting clients.
Let's learn more about Business Fitness.
We weave NetSuite into the DNA of your business. There are many threads in your organization. Over time, some become tangled. When NetSuite is woven in as your primary business system, the overall fabric becomes smoother, stronger, and more flexible. We at Business Fitness are a NetSuite success agency. With decades of NetSuite experience across hundreds of clients ranging from 3 users to billion-dollar enterprises, we love what we do. Whether we're helping you implement NetSuite for the first time or helping you improve how it works for your company, our focus is our relationship with you and ensuring you get the most from your software. It all starts by us listening. We get to know you and your organization. We seek to understand the good things you are committed to accomplishing. And together, we create an amazing tapestry, one that serves your entire company, allowing you and your business to thrive at this unique moment in history. This is possible because we're an ambidextrous organization. We see the big picture and the details, enabling us to serve you in both creative and strategic ways. Contact us now to schedule a conversation. We'd love to help you weave NetSuite into the DNA of your business.
Well, our guest today is Wayne Larrivee, voice of the Green Bay Packers since 1999. Here's Wayne. Wayne Larrivee, who's been the voice of the Green Bay Packers since 1999. Wayne, as always, thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you guys.
Wayne, I want to get your thoughts on the 2022 Packers and the recent mini camp, but first I wanted to maybe take a step back, and if you could tell us a little bit about your broadcasting career, where you grew up, and when you first decided that you wanted to be a broadcaster.
Well, I'll be dating myself, but really, it goes back to, I grew up in Western Massachusetts, about 2.5 hours outside of Boston, right on the New York border. And so, small town, Lee, Massachusetts, it was a lot of fun to grow up there because you had a chance to do everything. You could play all kinds of different sports, that type of deal. It was just great. I became a big sports fan. And I became a Yankees fan thanks to my grandfather on my mother's side of the family, and became a Packers fan because my favorite colors were green and gold. They just happened to be green and gold. And, I became a Packers fan. I had a lunchbox that had Jim Taylor and his green and gold Packers jersey on my lunchbox, and took it to St. Mary's School every day. And I thought the G on the side of the gold helmet was pretty cool, too. So I was captured by the unintentional marketing of those days.
Great. Now, when you had told a great story one time about going to the Boston Garden and honing your craft, I think you said in the hockey press box. Could you tell the viewers about that story?
Yeah, I went to Emerson College in Boston, which is located right in downtown Boston. At that time, it was right off of Beacon Street, just down the hill from the state capitol. And, so Boston was our campus. Boston Common was where we kind of hung out. The bar that became Cheers in the TV series sitcom in the 80s and 90s was the bar we used to go to. That was right down the street from where I was from my dorm at college. But the beauty of it is that, again, Boston was your campus. And so I used to walk over to the Boston Garden, which is probably about a 45-minute walk from where I lived. And, I would go into the hockey boxes, which were vacant at the time, and I would broadcast Celtics games into my tape recorder. It was, I enjoyed doing it. I had a great time. I'd take it back. I'd listen to it. I would, have other people listen to it, that type of thing as I went along. But I did that for the better part of 4 years of college. And that really did help me hone my skills as a play-by-play guy.
Did you gravitate toward football or basketball, or could you do hockey, baseball? What did you do? Was it just opportunity, or did you try to be versatile and dabble in everything, or did you have a plan?
No, I was a basketball broadcaster. I always wanted to be a basketball broadcaster, specifically on the radio. Back in the early '70s, when the Knicks won 2 world championships in a 4-year period, their announcer was a young guy by the name of Marv Albert, and he was an electric radio broadcaster, and that kind of inspired me. And he also did the New York Giants during that period of time, as well as the NHL New York Rangers. So, I kind of followed him a little bit. I started doing some football on the side, in addition to doing basketball. And that's kind of where it worked. My career seemed to gravitate more toward football because my first big break actually was when I was still in college. I got an opportunity to go to Pampa, Texas, which is in the Panhandle, but I'd say an hour and a half from Amarillo, up in the Texas Panhandle, and I got a chance to do high school football there. And that's Friday Night Lights in all its glory, and it was great. But that was a football job that I got, and I took a semester out of college. I did that for the fall, and then went back and finished up school, a year and a half of school after that. So my main professional experience was mostly in football, and that's where it kind of gravitated. Out of college, I went to Iowa, did Iowa Hawkeyes football, and for a year, and then Kansas City was the biggest break of my career. About 23 years old, I was hired to do Kansas City Chiefs football down in Kansas City, and that was great.
And then after Kansas City, you went to the 1984. I think you left Kansas City and went to the Chicago Bears. Talk about great timing.
Actually, it was 85, John. It was 85. I got to Chicago
85.
In time for the great 85 Bears, and it was wonderful. That was a great experience.
Wow. That was terrific timing. So then in 1999, you left the Chicago Bears, came up to Wisconsin. Talk about that move.
Well, as I said earlier, my favorite team as a kid were the Packers. I had 2 teams that I really followed as closely as a fan, the Yankees and the Packers. And I always said to myself, if I ever got an opportunity to broadcast either one of those games, either one of those teams, I would jump at it, no matter what I was doing. Baseball for me, I did some baseball in Chicago, filling in for Harry Carey on WGN. Chicago was a great experience. 14 years of the best years of my professional life were spent in Chicago, doing a variety of things from everything from Notre Dame to the Bulls to the Bears to the Cubs. It was just a great experience. But my career had evolved into more of a football, basketball type of bend, and therefore I didn't, I wasn't really into the baseball aspect of the business a whole lot. So football was where I was, and when the Packers job came up, I was interested in it.
And then you worked right about the same time. Max McGee and Jim Irwin left, right in '90. I think the Terrell Owens playoff game where he caught the winning touchdown was kind of a changeover for Green Bay because Jim Irwin left. I think he started in maybe 71, 72. Max McGee left the broadcast booth. Mike Holmgren ended his coaching career in Green Bay after that game. That was Reggie White's last game as a Packer. So it was a big transformation for the team in the booth and on the team.
Yeah, it really was. It was one of those situations where I was kind of stuck between 2 fan bases. The people in Chicago hated me for leaving, and the people in Wisconsin couldn't understand why why they hired the Bears guy to do the Packers. So I don't know if it could happen today with social media being the way it is, but back then, the only kind of feedback you got were on sports talk shows. And there were sports talk shows back then, but not like today. Not as many, and certainly not as strong a voice. And then, of course, you add on social media today. I don't know if you could do that. You could make that switch in today's game.
I had the opportunity. I've worked at Packer games since 1979, and for newspapers getting quotes, teams asked me to look at certain players for scouting reports and injuries and that type of thing over the years. And 2015, thanks to Ken Sommerfeld, he referred me in to be your statistician, yours and Larry McCarron's, and I learned a lot. I learned that football is totally different than being a statistician for basketball. Football there's a different pace to the game, and I have to give you more information to spot. There's so many things going on in a football game where you're describing 11 players on one team, 11 players on another, trying to how many wide receivers there are, what's the yard line, whatever I could do to help. And you had a spotter also. So what struck me though, working with you, is the game preparation that you employed and Larry did. I knew you were at the practices and you talked to the coaches, but it was the impressive scroll that you had of information, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that, because people might see that you have that little shelver that sticks out outside the radio booth, but you have about a 10-column spreadsheet, and you turn it over when there's a change of possession.
Yeah. Yeah, it's my spotting boards, and everybody does them differently in broadcasting. I don't know how much you can see of this, but this is kind of a typical page that I would have. I'll try to hold it up here a little closer for you. But it has information on listed numerically, and then players listed by position, that type of thing. And it's where all the research during the week goes. And I fill these out every week, and it's part of the preparation, part of the mental memorization of information. And an old boss of mine who did play-by-play told me down in Pampa, Texas. He said, you don't have to have everything memorized, but when you're broadcasting a game, you have to know where to go get the information if something happens, if you don't know it off the top of your head. I find, like a lot of broadcasters, we put together a lot of information we don't use during the game because maybe it doesn't come up, or there's not time to get that story or that stat into the game. But by the same token, the hard part for me is I spend all week doing these boards, and sometimes I don't have enough time to review them and look at where everything is on the board. So it's interesting, but it's part of the process I use for studying for a game.
And how long does that take during a week typically? So if there's a game, let's say it's noon on Sunday, when do you start? You get back from the previous game, it's Monday. Tell us about a typical week.
Well, to be honest with you, I've already set up the boards for all of these games the Packers will play this year. Now, I do some of this work in June. I set up the basic boards, all the players that they have in the organization at the time. And at times, now these rosters are 90 strong right now. But I put everybody down, and then I'll start adding some information, basic information on the players, the height, weight, the name, the position, everything the numerical roster is done. And now I'll start putting in some information, maybe last year's stats, a couple of notes on a player. Maybe I've seen an article or two on a guy that might play a role in a game coming up later this year, that kind of thing. That starts getting added now. But if you're looking at during the week of the game, I get the chart Monday. I make the changes because everybody has changes week to week in their charts, in their roster. And so I'll make the changes on Monday, start putting information in again on Tuesday, Wednesday. All the while, I'm looking at tape of the upcoming opponent as well. Do a lot of tape study because it helps you memorize names and numbers. It's harder to memorize names and numbers when you're trying to do it with just facts. It helps a whole lot if you can see the player and you see him on TV or whatever. That makes a big difference. So it's a process that goes on throughout the week.
And then do you have a software program that prints that out? I know that you had it laminated, or you have some type of plastic protection for it.
Yeah. The charts go into a laminated folder. And this is great because, I can pull them out at the end of the game and put some new ones in there. But it also keeps them together. If there's weather, and we often get weather in Green Bay, and we broadcast with the booth wide open, as you know, if there's weather, if it rains in the booth or snows, the charts are protected. So, it's a whole process. It's maybe a little old-fashioned. A lot of guys don't put as much down on paper as I do, but I think we all come up with a plan as to how we're going to cover the game, where we're going to have our information, and then you kind of stick with it throughout your career.
Johnny Carson archives his old shows, I think, in a salt mine down in Kansas somewhere, 2 miles deep. That's where they preserve it. Are you going to send your charts to the Library of Congress or the Packer Hall of Fame, or can we archive those for posterity?
No, my charts have been archived in landfills from Kansas City through Chicago to Green Bay. So that's where they go.
Okay. I don't consider myself soft, but I went up to Green Bay from '79 to 2015 with Packer games, and when I was referred to be a statistician for you, finding out that the booth was open was definitely a shock, I thought. And then the engineer was telling me that it sounds much better. It sounds tinny, like you're in a phone booth if the booth is closed, and the sound is just so much better when it's open. But boy, when that wind comes off the out of the east or northeast, that is one heck of a deal. You guys are tough. Is it tough to keep your voice going when it's 5 below and the wind, and it's pretty cold in the press box, in the radio booth?
Yeah, no, it could get a little when you're that cold, sometimes it's a little distracting, as part of you is trying to stay warm and the other part of you is trying to broadcast the game. But no, we've had some cold games in Green Bay, but we've also had some wonderful games where it's snowing like a snow globe, and the field gets that little crescent type of look to it. And Green Bay in the elements, that's what people want. I tell people this all the time. I mean, you can come to Green Bay anytime, but if you want the real Packers experience, come in December for a big game and hope the weather's bad. Hope it snows. Hope you get to see Packer in a snow globe situation, because that's the real experience.
The other thing that I was struck is how power-packed and good that your pregame show is before the game. I mean, you and Larry and Dennis Krause put on one of the best pregame shows in the league, because I've heard other broadcasts, and you are all business from 2 hours before the game. You and Larry start off talking, and then it goes to Dennis Krause. He brings on media people and maybe a James Jones, ex-player, and then you go down and interview Matt LaFleur. Can you talk about that process in the pregame?
Yeah, a lot of that's Dennis Krause. Larry and I get the ball. Now we get John Kuhn, our sideline reporter, as well, at the top of the day, which is 2 hours ahead of kickoff. And we do about 15, 20 minutes, depending, and then turn it over to Dennis, and he runs a great show. As you know, he's been 5-time Sportscaster of the Year in Wisconsin with good reason. He knows how to he's a great interviewer. If anybody's seen his show on Spectrum, he does a show now with Gary Ellerson and Leroy Butler, 2 former Packers, and he's just a great interviewer. And that pregame show sings because of him more than anything else. But it's something that we've done from the very beginning. It's funny. I'll never forget when I was in Kansas City, about, I want to say, my second or third year, we decided that we would have a 2-hour pregame show. Most teams had an hour pregame show, but at KCMO, we decided let's go for 2 hours, and they really wanted to sell it and sell the Chiefs and the Chiefs weren't very good at the time. And so, 2 hours seemed like, oh my gosh, that's like starting the pregame show on a Wednesday for a Sunday afternoon game. But what we did was we hired a kid who was still in college of the University of Kansas by the name of Kevin Harlan, and he put together the whole thing with correspondents around the league, and he hosted the thing. It was just phenomenal. But it was really his first big break in commercial radio, and he, of course, took off from there. But that's the first 2-hour show that I've seen. Now, of course, you have teams that do 3-hour shows. The Packers Radio Network does a 2-hour show, but the flagship station in Milwaukee does an hour before that show begins. And WTMJ started at that, and I think the new station will continue to do that as well. And other stations on the network do it as well. They'll do an hour before our pregame on the Packers Radio Network begins. So there's no shortage of information and opinion on any given Sunday morning for a Packers game that day.
Yeah, you mentioned Kevin Harlan. He's a Wauwatosa native. His father, Bob, used to be the SID for Marquette from 59 to 65. And I know when Marquette dropped football, that was a big demerit, because Bob Harlan was a football guy first. And they moved to St. Louis, ironically, to when Bob took the St. Louis baseball Cardinal job, and then when you said that Kevin was did the pregame. When you left for the Bears, Kevin, his big break then was subbing in for you, and then you were both off to the races after that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Kevin has had a tremendous career. Before I left Kansas City, we had him doing the Kansas City Kings. Kansas City Kings and Chiefs were both on KCMO radio at the time. And he, when Neil Funk left for Philadelphia, left Kansas City, Kevin stepped in and did the Kings on the radio. And that was a huge break for him. And then when I left, and he took over the NFL gig as well. So it's been great. Kansas City was a great melting pot for a lot of wonderful talent back in the, I guess, early 80s, you'd say late 70s, early 80s.
We're talking with Wayne Larrivee, the voice of the Green Bay Packers since 1999. Wayne, want to get your thoughts on the 2022 season, but first I want to take a step back to the 2021 season. And a very frustrating loss to San Francisco in the playoffs. It was kind of a hybrid between Brett Favre's last game in the cold against the Giants and the title game against Seattle after the 2014 season, where a lot of frustrating things happened that had the dominoes had to fall to lead to that loss. And what a special season that could have been, because all the injuries to the top players, Alexander, Bakhtiari, Jenkins, and they overcame it with coaching and personnel moves, but it was all for naught.
Yeah, it's funny because we've been talking about the NBA playoffs and now the NHL playoffs, and everyone gets so excited. The two or three greatest words in sports are Game 7, the two greatest words in sports, Game 7. Well, every playoff game in the NFL is Game 7. Every NCAA tournament game is Game 7. I mean, that's the beauty of it. And it's also the curse. One slip up and you're gone, regardless of how good a team you have. I look at the 15-1 Packers of 2011. I don't necessarily think they were a Super Bowl team, and people would say, well, why not? They were 15-1. Well, their defense had collapsed, and you still have to play some defense to win in the playoffs, and they were unable to do that. But 2014 was the next year. They had a championship caliber team, and in fact, they beat the eventual Super Bowl champion New England Patriots that year, and they had Seattle on the ropes and just beaten down for 55 minutes of that NFC championship game in Seattle. And as you mentioned, one break conspired to cost the Packers that ball game. But also Russell Wilson, give him credit for that game. People in these parts don't want to, they keep dwelling on the special teams gaffe that happened with the backup tight end and all these other things. And Julius Peppers telling Morgan Burnett to get down rather than run with that interception. Russell Wilson got an opportunity on the worst day of his pro career. I believe he threw 4 or 5 interceptions. He got an opportunity, and that quarterback came through when the chips were down, despite the fact that he picked himself up off the mat after a horrible day and finally got it done for Seattle in the end. That was very unfortunate for the Packers because that was a championship caliber team. The next time they were in the championship game was 2016, John. And that team was carried by Aaron Rodgers. That was a bad Packers football team, in my opinion. They were 4-6 and going nowhere when Aaron Rodgers said, well, I think we can run the table. But I will say this, I'll tell you this story. He and I were sitting in his locker before he made that quote, and this is during the week, and we looked around, and I said, boy, this is not a good football team. He said, this is a bad football team. And then later that week, he goes out and makes that quote and then backs it up with his finest moment, statistically, as a leader, as a quarterback, was the 2016 season when he took a 4-6 team and carried them all the way to the NFC Championship game. But that team was not Super Bowl caliber. I think Matt LaFleur's second team in Green Bay, the second 13-3 team, was a Super Bowl caliber team, and unfortunately ran into a team that was just a little bit better in Tampa Bay, and the Buccaneers prove it, beating the Packers twice that year. And then last year, John, that team was as good as any team. They weren't as good as the year before, but nobody was as good as Tampa Bay was the year before. Nobody was as good as Green Bay was the year before. But you can't base Super Bowl on that. You have to base Super Bowl on the present. And in the present last year, the Packers had a Super Bowl caliber team. And in fact, they beat both Super Bowl teams during the regular season, winning that game at Cincinnati, and then they routed the Rams in Green Bay. I mean, the dagger in that game was in the third quarter, when Douglas took the interception into the end zone. So the Packers were probably the best team in the league last year, in my opinion. But unfortunately, you get into the playoffs, things don't happen, momentum changes in a game. And, it's funny, the Packers had 7 first downs in the first 2 drives of that San Francisco game last January. They had 7 first downs the rest of the entire game. So things change, momentum changes, it's one and done. And the best team does not always win the Super Bowl. Trust me, I've seen it over the years many, many times.
Enjoyed working with you for 5 years. I learned a lot. I learned that you learn a lot just by kind of being quiet and listening. And you and Larry going back and forth, I learned more probably at pregame, and then when you really were honest during the commercial breaks. That's but I think my favorite
I don't want
comment,
to talk about that.
my favorite comment always was when we went into overtime, you would turn to Larry and say, "Rock, free football." And he would just shake his head, and that was my favorite. But I appreciate you being gracious when I was learning the ropes, trying to be a statistician.
Well, you worked really hard at it, John. And it was wonderful having you in the booth for those 5 years, and it's been great being on with you guys today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Wayne. Have a great summer.
I've seen a lot of failed implementations of good software. Any kind of CRM or ERP platform, usually the success is not in the platform itself or what it can or cannot do, it's about how you implement it. And the one thing I've seen with NetSuite is you can make it great. It's a great platform to build and change with your business. Especially with our company, we grew from startup to a medium to large size company in a matter of 6 years. And with that explosive growth, we've had to change rapidly, and Business Fitness has been along the ride with us and changing our NetSuite instance for us along the way. They provided the people with the right knowledge that can really get to the heart of what we're trying to accomplish. And they just know the right solution to the problem, not overly complicated and not too simple that it won't work. Sometimes we need them for many hours in a month, and sometimes we need less, and they've been able to really flex to meet our needs. Working with them has been a joy, and it's been great.
Well, that's our show for today. Thanks to Wayne Larrivee for going above and beyond and giving us a lot of great information. What was your highlight?
What a resource, what a behind-the-scenes guy, and getting a sneak peek at that was exceptional.
It was. The 2021 team was the season ended against San Francisco in a frustrating way, and they're doing a lot of things. There's a lot of changes this year, so it's going to be fun to follow them. Thank you, Dave Heineck from Business Fitness today for sitting in for Tom Pippins. He'll be back next week. And until then, thanks for watching.